Okay, in this video I'm going to extend the swaps derivative structure to include in a currency swap. And a currency swap, I'm taking this from Investopedia, and currency swap involves two parties that exchange a notional principal with one another in order to gain exposure to a desired currency. Following the initial notional exchange, periodic cash flows are exchanged in an appropriate currency. Okay, and again I go back to terms of worked examples here. I'm going to use John C. Hull again, and I would say in terms of giving a comprehensive introductory type treatment of the swaps area, this probably is one of the leading contenders. So the example that I'm going to use here is we're going to look at two companies. In this instance, X and Y. They have available to them funds that can be borrowed, and these are the most competitive rates that are available to both counterparties. So if X wants to borrow in yen, they pay 5. If they want to borrow in dollars, they pay 9.6. Likewise, if Y wants to borrow in yen, they pay 6.5. If they want to borrow in US dollars, they pay 10%. Obviously, there is some kind of market inefficiency. The spread here is 150 basis points. It's only 40 basis points here. Something possibly not quite right in terms of all the information being fully reflected into the rates. What the swaps contract allows us to do is to look at these spreads, look at the differential in the spreads, and to say, okay, we can structure a swap where each of the counterparties can benefit from borrowing at the rate that they have a comparative advantage in. So again, the same discussion as before it applies here. Company X has an absolute advantage in both rates, but has a comparative advantage here in yen, whereas company Y has an absolute disadvantage on both, but has a comparative advantage in borrowing in dollars. Keep in mind, X wants to borrow US dollars. X wants to borrow US dollars. Y wants to borrow yen. That's where they are disadvantaged. So if we're to structure a swap where each of the counterparties are to gain something, so in this instance we're told structure a swap so that the financial intermediary takes 50 basis points. That's a kind of a bump up on the previous 10 basis points we saw in the previous example, but maybe not too surprising given that currency swaps entail currency risk for the financial intermediary, so we pay them a little bit extra to reflect that risk. Okay, so what we have here then is this differential in spreads. How much potentially is available for each of the counterparties in terms of savings here. If we take the difference in the spreads, the 1.5 and the 0.4, that gives us a 1.1 potential savings that can be divvied up then amongst the counterparty X, counterparty Y, and the financial intermediary. If we're saying the financial intermediary must get 0.5% for structuring the swap, and keep in mind here the financial intermediary has to take on currency risk in this instance, that would leave then taking 0.5% out of the pot, that would leave 0.6% potential savings, and if we divide that equally between both counterparties, that would mean X and Y should gain to the tune of 0.3. So if X wants to borrow US dollars, X wants to borrow US dollars, the original quote of 9.6 we should be in a position to reduce that to 9.3, and if Y wants to borrow US yen, interest at a yen interest rate, then we should be able to bring that yen rate down to 6.3. Okay, so what we have here is these are the outcomes we want to engineer for the two counterparties savings of 0.3 on the most competitive rates available in the market, and we want to deliver to the financial institution 0.5%. Okay, in structuring the currency swap, and this is a currency swap given that the rates are not denominated in the same currency, it's fairly clear what the next step is. The swap has to be structured in order to remove currency risk from the counterparties. So if Y is paying out 10% in US dollars and X is paying out 5% in yen, we have to engineer both 5% being paid here in terms of yen and 10% being paid here. So the next step is actually kind of foregone conclusion, given that these rates are what Y pays and what X pays. We've got to deliver to them an equivalent interest rate denominated in the same currency in order to remove currency risk. And then the final stage then is, well, in order, if we have a payment of 10 and or receive a payment of 10 and pay out a payment of 10%, what rate here should company Y pay the financial institution so that overall the net position is 6.2 in terms of yen? Only one rate really works here, and that's 6.2. And likewise here, what if company X is receiving 5, paying out 5 in terms of yen, what rate here paid to the financial institution would produce a net overall figure of 9.3% denominated in dollars? And again, these rates are again predetermined. So this is pretty much in terms of structuring currency swap, we don't have the same degree of variability, and we know any number of combinations work here. Only one set of combined payments actually work here to produce the outcomes. The last thing we have to ensure is, does the financial intermediary take home 50 basis points? Well, if the financial institution receives 6.2, pays out 5, that's again in percentage terms of 1.2. If the financial intermediary receives 9.3, pays out 10, that's a loss of 0.7. A positive 1.2 minus 0.7 on this dollar wing of the swap does have a differential of 50 basis points. So the financial institution gets 50 basis points. Of course, then they have to go off and manage the currency risk that's embedded in these rates that are paid. There's a yen rate and there is a dollar rate, and this swap position could go on a number of years. So the financial institution then has to take on that currency risk, and part of the 0.5% that they're being paid, in fact, is compensation for not only interest rate risk and credit risk, but also the fact that embedded in the currency swap, the financial intermediary typically is the custodian also of the currency risk, and that the spread or the payment to receive is a little bit more elevated than usual.